your precious time for this masterclass. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's CXOverse masterclass. And before we start, here's a sneak peek into our ecosystem, CXOverse.
Every great journey begins with a connection. CXO Genie connected CXOs and brought them together. But connections are only the beginning. Today, CXO Genie evolves into CXOverse, a boundaryless ecosystem for global leaders to thrive in every dimension of success. CXOverse empowers leaders through tailored experiences, integrating health, wealth, and wisdom for holistic growth. This is more than a network. It's a transformative global ecosystem. Together, we redefine leadership for a boundless future. Welcome to CXOverse, inspiring leadership.
Wonderful. As many of you may already be aware, I do see quite a few familiar faces in the participants window. Your CXO Genie started a decade ago as a small WhatsApp group with Napoleon Hill's mastermind principle at its core. This core extends right into CXOverse, where we continue to work in perfect harmony for the attainment of a definite purpose. Now, how do we aim to bring this to life? CXOverse promises to expand possibilities, create a universe without boundaries for leaders, businesses, and industries through curated communities, bigger, bolder, better events, the power of collective minds, and exclusive thought leadership. So today we are truly boundaryless. Here are the communities that you see that come under the umbrella of CXOverse. And as always, our strengths, the three pillars, stand stronger than ever before. If you've been part of this universe, you already know the stories of the quick help and the high quality of solutions that you find here, the immense cumulative experience here, and of course, the cost effectiveness of this ecosystem. So yes, it is your very own network by you and for you. So to know more about us, do visit our website, cxoverse.com. And that's a little bit about us. As we start today's session, would love to introduce our speaker for the day, Mohandas Menon. About the session a little bit, the Paanwallah's paradox, Bansilal's 6-point formula for business success is a unique masterclass by Mohandas. And, it draws insights from an unlikely source, a neighborhood Paanwallah. The session uncovers timeless lessons in leadership, strategy, and business success that go far beyond conventional management theories. So let's welcome Mohandas, who comes to us here today with 45 plus years in leadership and strategy across industries spanning banking, entrepreneurship, corporate leadership, and governance. And he's the co-founder and managing director at Greenfern Consulting. He's been advising mid-market enterprises on strategy, leadership effectiveness, and M&A-driven value creation. Mohan has been an executive coach and board advisor to over 200 plus CXOs and many organizations. He's led mid-market firm to premium exits, achieving 12x to 19x EBITDA multiples. He comes with a global experience which spans across India, Europe, GCC, Southeast Asia, etc., and across industries, as I mentioned earlier. He's also the creator of strategy, narrative, and second curve mentoring. And this, kind of reflects his deep commitment to helping leaders drive clarity, coherence, and consequence in their strategic choices. So I'll not take too much time here. I'll just hand this over to Mohan to take us through this wonderful masterclass. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Swati. And that was a very comprehensive introduction you gave me. Thank you, everyone, for being here on a busy Wednesday to join this masterclass. As Swati has mentioned, the idea behind this is it could sound a little far-fetched because from Paanwallah to business strategy. But over the next 45 minutes, I will be sharing the framework and I'll explain how it worked out. Over the years, I've actually put it into practice in some places. In the initial years, obviously, I didn't realize it was of any value to me. But over the years, with experience, with understanding, I did come to realize that what this gentleman taught me, he was actually kind of a mentor, was actually very valuable. So without further ado, let's get into the 6-point framework that I'd like to show you. Okay. When I said that it was something that I might have thought years ago that it was unlikely that somebody could, Paanwallah could teach me something about business, but perhaps it isn't so unlikely. Indians have actually been astute businessmen for centuries. We all know that for almost 1,000 years until the early 1700s, we were amongst the two largest economies in the world, contributing almost a quarter of the global GDP. Our trading communities, the Marwaris, the Chettiars, the Gujaratis, and many others, built generational businesses across Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. Our weavers, our spice traders, and metal workers, they ran complex enterprises long before modern management theory existed. That lineage of business wisdom still flows quietly through our culture. From that perspective, Bansilal wasn't an exception. He was part of that continuum, applying the same instincts at street level. What he taught me became a framework I now call the Cascade of Strategic Coherence, a pattern I've seen in part or in full across companies worldwide, from 100 crore revenues to conglomerates. It is a large part of what makes them dynamic, balanced, and sustainable in a generational context. Through this session, I'll keep talking about generational businesses. For me, a business is successful not because it grows rapidly and suddenly. I don't really believe that that's how businesses should grow. I look at businesses which are multi-generational, that have survived and have grown and have managed through different waves of recessions, different waves of regulatory issues over many generations, 2, 3, 4 generations. That's what I call sustainability in business. Now, this framework that I'm going to start explaining now is, I think, I'd like to call it sophisticated thinking disguised as simplicity. Okay. Divansh, possibly you can end the screen share now. So if you're ready, let's begin. Okay. Now, my story takes place in New Delhi sometime in 1993. After 12 years in banking, I was now working with a listed NBFC, which counted a former deputy governor of the RBI, a former chairman of a public sector bank, and a former secretary to the government of India as distinguished members of its board. I thought I was in, rarefied company. I just received my third promotion in 2 years, and like many young executives of that age, mid-30s, climbing fast, I'd actually mistaken credentials for wisdom. Then a Paanwallah revealed strategic architecture that I'd never seen in any boardroom or leadership, management meetings. His name was Bansilal, and this is his story, and the business framework his innate street smart wisdom taught me. As I mentioned earlier, initially I assumed that this was simply small business pragmatism, tactics for roadside operations. Over the years, I recognized that what he demonstrated informally was strategic architecture that scales across sectors and geographies. And that's what I decoded from him, which I now call Bansilal's 6-point formula to street smart business success, or in a more formal way, the Cascade of Strategic Coherence. Can we go to slide 2, please, Divyansh? Before we begin, I have a small thought that I'd like to share with you. Stories at their core are vehicles for analogy. So while Bansilal's pawn shop and his small business empire, which I will keep talking about as we go forward, they may not mirror the structure or dynamics of your own organization and industry. That's actually not the point. The value lies behind the surface, or beneath the surface, in the transferable ideas and mostly in the patterns of thought. As you listen, I do invite you to look beyond the details and ask yourself, Which part of this resonates with the world I lead in? And what might it reveal about how I make strategic choices? Can we move to slide 3, please? So now let's go back to 1993 to a posh part of South Delhi. Our NBFC had just secured prime real estate in South Delhi for our corporate headquarters. But there was a problem. A pawn shop was positioned exactly where our architects wanted our main entrance to be. So my MD said, just offer him 5 lakhs and ask him to move across the road. When my admin manager went across to make the offer to him, the Paanwallah flat out refused. So I went over to see if I could convince him to take our offer. Menon ji, Bansilal said, my pawn shop earns me that 6-8 hafte mein, in 6 to 8 weeks. Why would I move? Now, once our building was ready and we moved in, I started to chat with Bansilal. Those days when a monthly salary of 60,000 rupees was considered pretty good, I was curious about how a Paanwallah earned so much more. And over many sweet pans and evening conversations, this man, who had never attended business school, revealed a strategic architecture that made me realize that many of the finance heads and other senior executives I met due to my work, and a few that I actually admired quite a bit, could learn a lot from him. Sorry. Divyansh, can we stop the screen sharing now? Now, remember that this was 1993. India had just begun economic liberalization. Business cycles moved in predictable 5 to 10 years waves. Technology disruption meant fax machines replacing telex. Today, in 2025, geopolitical fragmentation is accelerating. US-China decoupling seems to be a surety. EU regulatory complexity is ever increasing, and I've seen it in my own work, how difficult it's becoming to work with the EU at times. Supply chains that were resilient 3 years ago are now strategic vulnerabilities. Technology disruption cycles have compressed from earlier 8-year horizons to quarters now. The average time between a startup's founding and unicorn status is, I believe, down from 7 years to about 3 years now. And the average CEO tenure, it's below 5 years and declining. And here's what keeps thinking boards awake. Organizations can no longer learn slowly. You cannot A/B test your way through supply chain collapse. You cannot pilot your way through AI transformation. You cannot wait for market consensus before positioning the next shift. What Bansilal understood intuitively, and actually many of our small-time traders do, is that building systems that generate strategic options faster than markets eliminate them isn't just business, smart business anymore. It's actually existential. And yet, amid all this volatility, some truths don't change. Human instinct, curiosity, the rhythm of exchange, they've outlasted every wave of technology, which is why Bansilal's world still has something to teach ours. So the framework I'm about to share may have emerged from a pawn shop in 1993 South Delhi, but it's just as relevant a strategic architecture for navigating the presently unfolding business landscape. And as we'll see towards the end, perhaps even your own personal professional environment. And it does so precisely because it was built for uncertainty before uncertainty actually became constant. Let me show you what I mean. Bansilal started with this single pawn shop some years prior to when I met him. In the first few years after he came to Delhi, he lived frugally. He conserved and redeployed all of his cash flows into increasing his assets. By the time I met him, he owned 2 more pawn shops, which his 2 younger brothers managed. Now, the cash flows from his pawn shops funded a cable TV dealership and a fleet of tempos at Azadpur Mandi, Asia's largest vegetable market. Besides this, he financed commercial 3-wheelers, and he had near zero defaults. They were competing directly with one of our own NBFC's business lines in a small way. But the actual revelation came late one night. My team and I had to work late on a project, and I was leaving at around 11:30 at night. When I stepped out, I found a few luxury cars parked outside. Out of one of them stepped a portly, gray-haired, and very well-known industrialist who unfortunately is no longer with us now. Others standing around were the CEO of a large telecom company. I don't know, he might even be here today, a senior counsel of the Supreme Court, and a few others, including the assistant to a well-known music producer buying special pan for his boss's late-night edit sessions. The industrialist, when he steps out of the car, I was quite close to him. He looks at the telecom head and says, "Arey, so-and-so, what's the latest on those licenses?" Bansilal smiled at me. "They come for pan," he said, "but they also come for casual chit-chat and sometimes confidential deals away from their homes and clubs." And I listen. And the paradox here, the most valuable market intelligence in South Delhi wasn't being gathered by Bloomberg terminals or consulting firms. It was actually being collected by a Paanwallah wiping his hands on a soiled rag. What I observed in that single pawn shop became the seed of the 6-point pattern I now see, in part or in whole, across mostly every resilient enterprise. Like I said, from 100 core companies to conglomerates. So let's take a few minutes, explore these, and see how they fit in with our current business context. Can we go to the next slide, please, Divyansh? Slide 4. So now we are coming to understanding why he decided not to move, despite being offered money. We offered him 5 lakhs to move just 50 feet across the road, on the other side of the road. He actually laughed. It took me months to realize he wasn't defending real estate. He was defending access architecture. Most of us hear of location and we think address, rent, frontage. Bansilal thought in terms of who arrives, how often, and with how much time to linger. He didn't want maximum footfall. He wanted qualified, repeatable footfall. People who returned daily and had time to talk. His pawn shop wasn't in the busiest lane. Actually, across the road, there was more traffic. But it sat where the rhythm of the neighborhood created its own steady current. I see a lot of, malls coming up in Gurgaon, and many of them are in places where people won't even step in. Anyway, that's a different discussion. So when I said, the rhythm of the neighborhood created its own steady current for Bansilal's pawn shop. He had large number of office workers passing by every day. He had regular local residents by evening because there was a residential locality just across the other side of the community center. There were industrialists, CEOs, lawyers, movers and shakers who came later at night after dinners and parties because it was at the junction of a very high-end residential area as well. So 3 customer streams, 3 different margin segments, 3 distinct energies sharing the same ground, the same location, 3 time zones of value. That's not a shop, that's a platform. So now let's take a look at a contemporary example. Let's take B2B SaaS software as a service embedded in workflow. Think about how you work every day. Some of you here may be using Slack for communications. Within that, you've got Salesforce integration, CRM data flowing into your chat channels without leaving the conversation, Zoom or Google Meet, starting meetings directly from Slack, no app switching. Similarly, Jira or Asana project management, DocuSign and Calendly, they're all embedded. You don't go to Salesforce or open DocuSign. They show up right where your team collaborates, embedded in your day-to-day work. Similarly, SuccessFactors is embedded in SAP S/4HANA. LinkedIn, it didn't become valuable as a social network. it positioned itself where professionals already operate, such as embedding Sales Navigator in Salesforce or widgets in application tracking systems like Workday. Multiple use cases, multiple segments, one position, and that's access architecture at scale. That's what I meant by access architecture. None of them rely on users stumbling upon them. They live where the user's daily momentum already flows. And that's Bansilal's wisdom rendered in code. Position yourself inside habitual movement, not outside it waving banners. Can we move to slide 5, please? So here's the strategic question. Are you positioned where your highest value customers naturally operate, repeatedly, with time to engage? Or are you somewhere else hoping that they'll notice you? Because poor location, physical or digital, cannot be repaired by marketing spend alone. You can advertise your way into visibility, but not into relevance. That's not understanding real estate. That's actually understanding human behavior and being smart enough to create multiple value propositions from one position. It's designing proximity to benefit from various aspects of human behavior and not just traffic and footfall. It's actually about being present where valuable exchanges happen organically and often. And when you achieve that, everything downstream, marketing, loyalty, even pricing, moves from persuasion to preference. Because human behavior, not reach, becomes the engine of growth. And once you've built that kind of presence, a new question emerges. What do you do with this flow that gathers around you? Can we go to slide 6, please? So there we have it. We have access architecture or location, which leads to footfall. Footfall leads to cache and information velocity. So most businesses stop at conversion metrics, but that's incomplete. The core principle to me here is extract dual value from every interaction, money and intelligence. Bansilal's kiosks generated daily cash. He used 1-day cash cycles to fund 30-day cycles in cable TV, 7-day cycles in tempos, 36-month cycles in financing. That's deliberately building a liquidity waterfall. Fast cycles funding slow cycles. Always cash coming in from somewhere. For any of the CFOs who might be here, to me, this is financial leverage devoid of dependencies. Cash velocity that buys patience, says no to bad deals, and seeds longer cycle bets. That's deployment optionality. Maybe we can end the screen share here, Divyansh. Let me give you a recent personal example. I took over as the fractional CEO of Ayurved, which is a 33-year-old animal healthcare company. Originally, it was a part of Dabur, owned by one of the Burmans. It's a mature business. It was debt-free and with substantial free reserves. Yet, when I took over, I insisted we move to 100% cash payments. 100% advance payments. Absolutely no credit, no checks, all online payments only. The sales team protested. They protested like crazy. Finance questioned the need. My teams said, sir, you don't understand this industry at all. We can't sell like this. And our competitors were still offering 60 to 90-day credit terms. Sales did dip a bit in the first few months, I admit, but we eliminated receivables entirely, reduced admin cost and time hugely. I used the freed up sales admin teams to interact with frontline sales teams as well as customers to get real-time information and help boost sales. So that's information velocity. And we redeployed that free capital velocity into export expansion, including into new geographies, without having to dip into reserves or ask for extra funding. And that built substantial benefit for us. The results go way beyond. When I sold the company about 2.5 years later, we managed to get an EBITDA multiple 2 to 3 times higher than the sector average for mid-market slow growth companies. That insight the importance of cash velocity as strategic freedom is something I learned from Bansilal. Of course, the execution came from 4 decades across banking, NBFCs, strategy advisory, and other fractional CEO roles. But the additional valuation multiple was the final result of all this. But the initial understanding of what cash velocity is all about, that came from what I understood from Bansilal. And this cash velocity created strategic freedom. The results of that freedom showed up in the valuation. This is a principle that I think most of our Marwari and Gujarati business friends understand as an intrinsic part of their DNA. I remember reading about Sri Ghanshyam Das Birla, the great-grandfather of Kumaramangalam Birla. Apparently, towards the later years of his life, he only wanted one report in his office in the mornings. Every morning when he came into his office, he just wanted a report of the current cash flows across all his businesses, nothing else. Everything else he left to his, his sons and the other people who were running. But this was something that he insisted upon. And like I said, that seems to be part of the DNA of our Gujarati and Marwari friends. Many of you may be here today. But then the importance of cash velocity wasn't the only real edge that I understood from Bansilal. More important, possibly, was information velocity. Rahul, can we see the next slide, please? Slide 7. Bansilal's pawn shop was actually a living information exchange. He could hear casual, unguarded conversations from people at different organizational levels. During the day, office workers. In the evening, local residents. At night, a mix of people, including movers and shakers. Different hours, different worlds, different sources of information, revealing patterns. When you listen long enough across contexts, repetition reveals trend lines. And that's what most of us miss. Cross-domain pattern recognition, which results in foresight. So the takeaway here is, let's ensure that every transaction is simultaneously a revenue event and an intelligence event. Ask whether you have mechanisms to capture unstructured, high-signal intelligence. Not just what people bought, but why. What they hesitated on, what concerns they voiced, what patterns you're seeing. Can we do a quick, short poll, Rahul? Now, if I were to ask you to show a show of hands, how many of us here have a formal system, not just a CRM, but an actual mechanism for frontline staff to relay, unstructured intelligence that they are hearing, not structured customer and sales flow data, but the qualitative information that interactions with customers bring? How about a show of hands of those who do? Can you use the Zoom show of hands, please?
You can raise your hands just by pressing the react button, and you'll get various emojis. So you can raise your hands via that.
Okay. Mahipal Nair, he's given a thumbs up. So is that, okay, let's say that they have a formal system. They actually have a formal system to relay unstructured intelligence from frontline sales staff. Anybody more? Well, I don't know if others are reluctant to do so, but anyway, it seems to be a kind of a gap because as I see it, most companies invest heavily in data systems. Sandeep G has given a thumbs down, so I'm assuming he doesn't. So actually, as I said, most companies invest heavily in data systems, CRMs, analytics, dashboards, business intelligence tools, but very little in intelligence systems. Data tells you what happened. Intelligence tells you what's changing. And I'd like you to keep that in mind for your own use later down the line. So for the sales heads and CEOs here, your CRM won't show you the customer who always asks about a feature that you don't offer. Those signals matter, but only if someone's listening. Now, for the CHROs here, your frontline staff is sitting on this intelligence. Most organizations treat them as transactional executors, not as intelligence gatherers. And like I said, I've actually put this in practice, and the results were remarkable, both in terms of morale as well as in terms of how business efficiency is increased. So finally here, cache velocity gives you options, information velocity gives you the edge. Zomato's AI, for instance, listens to what, 5 to 10 million orders a day? That's information velocity at scale. And cache velocity and information velocity together give you freedom to act before others react, which the uninitiated would say, hey, they got lucky. No, they didn't get lucky. They saw something that others didn't. Okay. So now let's try and look at what information flow can lead to. Divyansh, can we go to the next slide, slide 8? Okay, so information by itself changes nothing. The world is full of people who know and still can't move. For me, the core principle is this: cache velocity without action is overcaution. And information velocity without action is just entertainment. What must we do to stay long-term relevant is to convert these into strategic options, the ability to move before markets move, by converting the habit of listening into pattern recognition. What Bansilal overheard, when he overheard that there's a new residential complex coming up somewhere, he actually secured the rights to distribute newspapers very early on. I don't know how many of you know it, but across Delhi, NCR, and maybe many other cities, there's a mafia that controls all these. Anyway, so he knew that something is coming up, and he acquired the right to distribute newspapers there. By the time the construction was over and the families had moved in, his position was already embedded. That's not luck. That's converting intelligence into positioned advantage. What separates insights from action is the ability to convert information into options, clear executable choices that you can activate before anyone else can. Most of us wait for a signal to become a headline. The best learn to recognize patterns that are building and then act while they're still whispers. Options are the antidote to rigidity. They give you the ability to choose rather than be cornered by circumstance. You can go to slide 9, please. Let's take a look at a contemporary example, Zerodha. Nitin and Nikhil Kamath could have built another stock brokerage, but they listened. Traders were complaining about loaded brokerage fees and lack of transparency. So what did they do? They built a discount brokerage, flat fees, no hidden charges. To me, that's a pure blue ocean move. But here's the optionality. As they grew, they collected data on investor behavior. What instruments were popular and when? When were people entering and exiting? What information is it that they searched for? That intelligence created options. The Kite trading platform, then Coin, their zero commission mutual funds platform, and Versity, their online education resource for the stock markets, which I believe is one of the it has one of the largest audiences of such kind in the world. Each move was informed by intelligence from the previous one. Each created new possibilities. Today, we're all aware of Zerodha's success. Profitable, millions of users, multiple revenue streams that didn't exist at start. And that's, to me, information converted into options. Can we end the screen share now, please? Do we have any COOs in this room? Anyway, Flipkart uses real-time warehouse data to dynamically reroute shipments when delays hit, turning intelligence into supply chain options without overstocking. I don't know if there are any Flipkart team here, But I think that's something that that is very relevant to this. Amul did the same, actually. Milk data became logistics data. That became diversification options. Every insight became the seed to another option. In another context, when I talk about blue oceans, Amul, I think, was a huge blue ocean even before the term blue ocean was conceived. It's used everything in what I'm talking about today. Almost everything Amul has used. Anyway, I'd like you to consider another takeaway, actually. Options aren't just your plan B. Options are the ability to choose rather than being forced into a single path. And to me, the second order thinking here is the most dangerous moment isn't when you fail. It's when you succeed so well at one thing that you stop maintaining options. Because success creates organizational inertia. You double down, you optimize, you try to become more efficient at exactly that one thing. After all, why fix it when it ain't broke, right? But then the market shifts and we're left wondering what to do next. Classic case, Nokia, Kodak, BlackBerry. So if you don't have options, you're left wondering what you do next instead of having the basis for making the required shifts structured and ready. Every decision should be evaluated not just for ROI, but for the options it creates or closes. My message for my CFO friends here, optionality is resilience. For CHROs, it's leadership depth. For CEOs, optionality is your strategic flexibility. Think about it. How many optional strategic paths does your organization have right now? Not theoretical, but actually executable. 1, 2, more. Now, for individuals too, options are important because the executive with 2 or 3 viable paths forward has power. The one with only one has dependency. And now we come to the fourth point in this framework, which means we're halfway through. By this time, usually, it's very normal on Zoom for your attention to start wandering. But stay with me for this next part, because point 4 is important. It's actually where the accumulated advantages convert into structural power. So here we come to what do we do with options? Options actually compound to leverage. This, to me, is the main pivot point. When you accumulate options, they compound into leverage, the ability to act with force disproportionate to your size. The core principle to me here is that leverage isn't just about debt. It's about the capacity for unconstrained action through the use of various resources such as financial leverage, information asymmetry leverage, relationship leverage, and human resource leverage. If we look beyond the traditional corporate definition of leverage being the ability to access debt, I would argue that leverage could also mean other such things, whatever we've discussed earlier. So these don't appear in quarterly reports, yet they drive competitive advantage, at times, maybe even more than your balance sheet. If you go back and look at Bansilal, you'll see he had 4 types working simultaneously. He had financial leverage. His pawn shops generated cash that funded everything else. He didn't require financing of banks. He had informational leverage. When the tempo owners came to pay their EMIs, and those days it was mostly in cash, he got informal market intelligence, vegetable and fruit price movements, supply disruptions, demand shifts. One business fed intelligence into others. And his pawn shop customers didn't see him as a competition or as a threat. He was neutral, and he had a kind of social invisibility. So they discussed matters amongst each other without fear, and at times even sought his counsel. As a result, he had unfiltered intelligence from unguarded conversations before the markets priced them in. Relationship leverage. His network was self-reinforcing. Different client segments found utility and value. The pawn shop became a platform, a reason for impromptu connection. This is a classic example of what Parker, Van Alstyne, and Chaudhary discuss in their book, The Platform Revolution. Of course, in a brick and mortar context rather than in the digital one that they mostly speak about. So all these put together allowed him substantial operational leverage. We can end the screen share now, Rahul. I've spent about 25 years observing and working towards architecting leverage across manufacturing, financial services, and tech. What Bansilal built intuitively, most organizations struggle to design deliberately. The difference isn't resources. It's understanding how advantages compound. Let's take a contemporary example again, Reliance Retail. Reliance Retail has acquired franchise rights or bought dozens of international brands. When you shop in premium malls today, multiple stores belong to Reliance, and you'll notice that the billing all flows back to Reliance Retail. They're collecting unified data across brands, categories, price points. At Jio, with 400 million subscribers, connectivity data, spending data, movement data, that's leverage. The ability to see patterns no one else sees and act without asking for permission. We'll talk about acting without permission later. And if you recall, Mr. Mukesh Ambani had very, very clearly stated that data is the new oil. Now, one for the CMOs. Zomato analyzes order patterns, delivery times, restaurant performance across neighborhoods. That's intelligence that allows them to launch hyperlocal campaigns and restaurant partnerships before competitors can even spot the opportunity. I'm told that Zomato, I don't know if someone from Zomato is here, but Zomato today provides hyperlocal reviews of restaurants. Because when you give a review, if the restaurant is further away from you than someone else, you might give it a lower review because it takes the food, cools down by the time it reaches you. So they've started doing hyperlocal reviews where in your area, what's the kind of review that particular restaurant has. Now that's actually leveraging information for operational efficiencies and catering for human behavioral characteristics. Can we go to the next slide, please? But I would request you to remember a couple of crucial factors. Leverage is neutral, and so it can cut both ways by amplifying whatever it touches. A weak judgment turns leverage into risk. Leveraging without wisdom accelerates mistakes. And the other point I'd like to make here is scale without leverage just creates bureaucracy. Build leverage first, then scale, or build them together. Leverage enhances the power to scale and of scale. But remember again, scale without leverage will just create a bureaucracy. To me, again, the second order thinking here is leverage isn't a one-time asset. It's a living balance sheet. It decays without renewal. So you maintain and compound it over time. Keep listening, keep building relationships. Don't let it decay. Yesterday's intelligence becomes today's common knowledge. And ultimately, the highest form of leverage is creating conditions rather than responding to them. That's consequence design. And finally, real multidimensional leverage converts into something even more valuable. Can we move to the next slide, please? Let's go back to 1993. My MD offered Bansilal 5 lakhs to move, quite a big amount in those days. He laughed. And I couldn't understand it. What I missed was freedom. The freedom is the ultimate strategic goal. The ability to make long-term decisions without being controlled by short-term pressures, creditors, investors, or even desperation. Bansilal could refuse 5 lakhs because he wasn't desperate. He could choose businesses based on strategic fit not on survival. He could maintain quality because he wasn't chasing volume. Why? Because he built freedom for himself. And that freedom that gave him the freedom in a way he could manage his businesses and his customers the way he wanted. Let's end the screen share now. Let me give you another contemporary example. In the 1990s, Infosys made a critical decision. They would go public and list on NASDAQ, even though it was expensive, complex, and most Indian IT companies were staying private or listing only in India. And remember, this was the 1990s when the kind of resources we have today, we didn't have those days. Now, why did they do it? Because Narayana Murthy and his partners understood that transparency and governance would create long-term freedom. By subjecting themselves to NASDAQ's very rigorous disclosure requirements, they built credibility. By distributing stock ownership broadly, they ensured no single entity could dictate their strategy. This autonomy allowed them to make long-term investments in employee development, in infrastructure and innovation, even when competitors were chasing short-term arbitrage. For a long time, that freedom continued to compound. For the CFOs here, I think freedom is the ultimate risk management. This is anti-fragile design, positioned to benefit from volatility rather than be destroyed by it. Take a look at Tata Motors financial year 24 annual report. Around 11,000 odd crores, 11,300 crores or something of free cash flow. It was up by about maybe 2,500, 2,800 crores from the previous year. Now, this 11,000 odd crores of free cash flow came from enhanced production, plant, and working capital efficiencies. And that funded EV capex and R&D with no new debt. As with the Infosys example, that's true autonomy, the ability to invest in a strategic transformation without asking permission from lenders or from anybody else. Yet, we often lock ourselves into situations of rigidity for questionable benefits. And one example that I'd like to give you here is how companies accessing green loans for lower interest rates and ESG optics, they get locked into rigid, often outdated compliance protocols. True autonomy means saying no to greenwashing debt that delivers short-term PR but creates long-term operational constraints. Now, the problem that I see is that many organizations pursue growth hoping to achieve freedom, but then that can perversely create structures that limit freedom. So build strategic autonomy first. It's a foundation for generational business sustainability. I wonder if we have time for a quick poll. I thought we could just, okay, let's drop the poll for now and go to the next slide. Can we go to the next slide, please? So when you have freedom first, growth becomes a choice, not a compulsion. You grow at your own pace, your own direction. You say no to growth, compromising freedom. Remember, every decision either expands or contracts freedom. Debt that doesn't create leverage is a freedom tax. Scale that reduces optionality is a strategic trap. Partnerships creating dependency can blow up in your face. Freedom isn't just a reward for success, it's the foundation for sustainable success. And true strategic autonomy, freedom, converts into something even more enduring, respect and relevance. Can we move to the next slide, please? And this is the final point in the 6-point framework. This is what I believe builds organizational legacy, respect and relevance. So freedom leads to respect and relevance. They are the ultimate dividends of freedom. You can't demand them. You earn them over time through consistency and consequence. Why did industrialists and executive management occasionally seek out a Paanwallah's counsel? Because he demonstrated something more valuable than expertise. Pattern recognition across contexts without agenda. He had proven longevity, decades of operations, managed a family business in continuity. He had weathered cycles, survived downturns. So longevity demands adaptation, and respect is judgment validated by credibility. It emerges from demonstrated consequence over time. Just take Godrej as an example. 127 years old, I think, 5 generations. They're everywhere from locks to real estate to consumer goods to aerospace. Why is their name synonymous with trust in India? Because they've been around. They've survived and grown through independence, partition, license raj, liberalization, globalization, digitalization, and they've adapted through every era. For CFOs, respect in the capital markets comes not from quarterly beats, but from sustained predictability and resilience. If you look at Godrej's overall cost of capital, from what I remember from public reports, it's somewhere between 2 to 3 percentage points lower than the industry average. That's not just brand equity. That's a consequence of earned respect through longevity and resilience. So you can go to the next slide, please. And relevance is the twin to respect, the capacity to stay current without losing depth. Where respect is past achievement, relevance is ongoing contribution. And you remain relevant through, always learning, through always adapting, always being accessible, always being generous with your time and where you are. TCS is a contemporary example. It could have become irrelevant many times, but it didn't. It adapted, it changed from Y2K to digital transformation, emergence of cloud computing, and now AI becoming strategic. TCS, despite all these, still remains at the cutting edge of relevance. And I think Microsoft under Satya Nadella is doing the same. Organizations lose relevance when they stop listening to market signals. It's what happened with Hindustan Motors, respected for many years, completely irrelevant because they stopped listening to the market. Whereas Mahindra moved from being a tractor and SUV company to becoming a company which is a mobility solutions company, still respected, still relevant. So you can go to the next slide, please. So there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. Location leads to footfall. Footfall leads to cash and information velocity. Cash and information velocity leads to options. Options lead to leverage. Leverage leads to freedom. And freedom leads to respect and relevance. That, in short, is Bansilal's 6-point formula to street smart business success, or as I said it, the formal name that I use, the Cascade of Strategic Coherence. And now one final truth. You can move to the next slide, Divyansh. One final truth is that the 6-point system isn't just for organizations. It can be your own executive operating system. You can move to the next slide, please. For professionals who want to build depth, breadth, and relevance to their careers. You can move to the next slide. So when I translate this business framework to a personal framework, your own executive operation system, what does access mean? It means that you position yourself where opportunities converge, boards, platforms, various networks. What does dual velocity mean? Extract, yes, compensation. Compensation can be in various forms, and context memory from every engagement. Options, convert intel, information, into pattern recognized pivots. Build T-shaped expertise. I'll discuss T-shaped expertise in a different context later, if required. Leverage. Use all of the 3 above, not your titles, to build and walk the path you want. Build freedom, the capacity to say no to roles that dilute your expertise so that you can continue to walk the path that you choose. And respect and relevance. Earn trust through demonstrated depth and breadth. Sustain relevance by continuous learning and adaptation, and cultivating pattern recognition and context memory. That's it for now, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for your attention so far. We'll open the floor for question and answers. If you can go to the next slide, please, Divyansh or Rahul. So this is the framework. The floor is open now for question and answers. And I think before we get into that, there were two questions that apparently came in when people, registered. So the first one was from Rajiv Ranjan of the CSCO community. Is Rajiv here today? Anyway, I'll say the question is how to build the ability to observe minutely and capture the wisdom firsthand. That's actually very interesting, Rahul, because the ability to observe minutely isn't just about being attentive. It's about what your mind does with what it sees. And I think of it as context memory, which we've just discussed a little while back. So how do you, your question is, how do you build the ability to observe minutely and capture wisdom firsthand? Okay, so as I said, context memory, when you remember where and why something happens and you hold that context, you start to see echoes, patterns, repetitions. Over time, that becomes pattern recognition. Your mind begins to join the dots almost subconsciously. If you take Bansilal, he wasn't really analyzing data. He was noticing recurring patterns. So if you want to build that muscle, you don't start with observation. You start with attention to context. Ask yourself, what's changing around this event? Who benefits? What's shifting beneath the surface? So when you begin to track context and memory together, wisdom starts to accumulate quietly. And then, as I say in my second curve work, which is something else that I do, it becomes one of your invisible assets, pattern recognition. It's what separates those who react fast from those who see early. I hope that answers. I mean, in a short time like this, that's the best I can say. But we can, you're all free to message me or mail me separately, and I'll try and give you more detailed answers. So the second question that came in advance was from Parthasarathi Gopalan from the CFO community. Practical aspects on how to achieve scalability in business within reasonable time. Okay, so something that a CFO would ask. I like it because it brings a conversation from philosophy down to practice. Again, let me get the question right. Practical aspects on how to achieve scalability in business within a reasonable time. I think of scalability not as doing more, but as designing for a cascade of coherence, as we discussed. So in other words, every system, every process or decision should have the potential to multiply its effect without multiplying the effort. Actually, the problem is, I think today what's happening is organizations scale output instead of architecture, getting the architecture right. Just like you're building a building, you need to get the architecture right, the framework right, and then you add on to it. So if you replicate success horizontally, the same team, same structures, which creates fragility, not scalability. So anyway, that's what I call consequence craft designing, so that each action has a longer shadow. So I think the question would shift from what was it that he asked? How fast can we grow? To actually how intelligently can we, propagate all the efforts. And if each rupee of cost or capital generates more optionality to the next cycle than it did in the last, then you're scaling, not stretching. I hope that answers the questions from Rajiv Ranjan and from Parthasarathi Gopalan. If any other questions?
Yes, Mohan. We do have a couple. We are a little past 7:30, so maybe we'll just take these two quick ones. And then if I may suggest that if anybody has other questions, please do fill it in the feedback form. We'll email that to you as well. And we'll be happy to pass them on to Mohandas then.
In
I
fact,
just want
otherwise, if Swati, what you could do is, I think anyone who has any questions, if they mail them in, I'm
yeah.
happy to give them a detailed answer and send it back. And I'll also send along with that, you know, uh, the questions that Rajiv, Ranjan, and Rajiv and Parsati Gopalan asked. I'd be happy to share with everybody here who wants it when, something that I call the 6 invisible asset assessment framework. It's something that is proprietary that I've developed, which helps them to understand what pattern recognition, context memory is all about. And if they fill it in and send it back, we will prepare a report free of charge, which shows them where they are in these. These are, when I talk about 6 invisible assets, they're assets that senior role holders who have got about, say, 18, 20, 25 years of work experience very typically forget or don't realize that they already have it. It doesn't come up in their annual reports and things like that. I'm very happy to send it across to anyone. They can fill it up, send it back, and we will give them a personalized report on where they are and what they could do in order to develop context memory, in order to develop pattern recognition, which is exactly what one of them has asked here. In fact, both of them have asked in different ways. So you can do that if you think that's okay.
Sure, we'll do that. I see some, a lot of comments coming up, and we are running a little bit out of time.
Yeah.
Let me just take up one question from Kajri. So she says that did Bansilal share any challenges he faced in his journey? If yes, how did he handle those? And I'm curious to know how successful people deal with challenges.
Okay, so Bansilal was one of the most practical men I ever met. And I've 45 years, I've met very, very different types of people. He was very clear about one thing. Now, a major problem that he had, I don't know if I should be saying it here, was, the usual mafias which would come in and demand money from him, whether they were mafia in uniform or mafia out of uniform. And he, over a period of time, he used the only thing that I think he actually used, from his networks, that the people who came to ask them to help him, not to stop this, but to reach the right person in, maybe the local, police or the local whoever, the gangland guys or whoever they may be, in order to go and have a conversation with them and then have a practical understanding. So to answer Kajri's question, I think one is to understand what are the practicalities inherent in the environment at a particular point of time. And then how do you manage those things? I'm not suggesting that, people bribe their way out of things. So, let me put that on record. But understand what are the conversations that you can have with the people who can help you to manage it. What are their practical, the practicalities that they face? What are the issues that they have? Basically, I think he had a lot of a very strong emotional quotient. He understood people. He understood that behavior is something that he needs to kind of mirror and help change. Everything that we discussed today, if you look at it, somewhere or the other, there is human behavior characteristics that he understood and he built upon.
Thank you. We'll take one question from Balaji, and for the others who put up the questions, we will make sure that we send them over to Mohandas. He'll like he's already mentioned, he'll be happy to answer them. But due to time limitations, we'll just take this last one. Balaji asked how to deal with situations when competition is disrupting the leverage.
When competition is disrupting leverage, is that right?
Yes. How to deal with such situations?
So I think before that, before you even look at leverage, leverage, as I said earlier, is unconstrained action. How do you develop unconstrained action? When you actually listen to information velocity, when you position yourself, it all goes back one step. You position yourself where you can get the right kind of, information and as I said, information velocity, but whatever comes in. How do you understand those? With those, what are the options that you have? So when you say leverage, I actually don't know, Balaji, what kind of competitive leverage you're talking about, whether it's financial, whether it's operational, whatever it may be. But there would definitely be, if you're able to develop that context memory within the organization and pattern recognition, which many people have, is then to understand what are your options. When you understand your options, then understanding what leverage you have to, overcome some other constraint is something that can be done. Again, coming to something like this, I think that is a very wide question. If you want, and if you want to have a direct one-on-one conversation with me, just off the record, where you actually explain what you're talking about, then I might be able to help you think through. I will never be able to give you the answers straight off, in the sense, unless I know more about your the environment that you work in. But I can help you to think through the paths that you might have available. I think the question is very broad. You need to get into it a little bit more into specifics. And like I said, happy to take it offline and do it.
Sure. So he does say thank you for that, and he'll connect. All right. So then thank you so much, Mohandas, for this wonderful session. And would you like to kind of close it by a short summary today?
I would, but we're already quite way past time. Is everybody okay with? I just wanted to come back to the main questions: location, where are you positioned, where should you be, velocity, are you extracting dual value from every interaction, option, how many viable strategic paths do you have right now, leverage, can you execute your next move without external permission or external dependencies, not permission, it could be any kind of dependency, freedom, what constraints prevent your long-term optimal decisions, and finally, what do you want to be respected? Relevance. What do you want to be respected for in 10 years? And are today's decisions consistent with whatever you want to be? So that is legacy. Ultimately, at the end of the day, all this, what is an organization for? If you say an organization is a living entity by law, it's an independent entity by itself, companies and other forms of such organizations. What are you here for? Is it just to, do some business for 10, 15, 20 years? Or is it to build a legacy which lasts like, any of the Bidla companies or, Unilever or any of those? So if it's legacy that you're building, then how do you create that relevance and that respect? And each step before that builds into these. So that's my final thought for you. I mean, for CFOs, are you designing financial systems that create freedom, or are you silently reducing it by any chance? For CHROs, are you building systems that compound human capability, or are you just extracting compliance? I think for now we can end with these.
Thank you so much. We do have a lot more to learn, but yes, we'll stop here.
It's fairly, it's quite a heavy topic. I think compressing it into 45 minutes was a bit of a challenge for me as well. I hope it was something that people enjoyed. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much for joining us and taking this session. We will hope that everybody fills in the feedback forms. Any questions, please do add them there. We'll be, like I said, we'll be happy to pass them on to Mr. Menon and bring back his replies to you. Have a great evening, everyone.